The morning sun rose over the colony of New Dawn, painting the sky in beautiful shades of orange and pink. The planet Valora 7 was a peaceful place, far from Earth but filled with the warmth of human life. 12,000 people called this world their home. They grew food in the rich soil, built schools for their children, dreamed of a bright future among the stars. Captain Park Do-yeon stood at the edge of the landing field, watching the sky with tired eyes. He was a man of 47 years, with gray hair at his temples and deep lines on his face. He had spent his whole life in the military, but the past 5 years on this quiet colony had been the most peaceful of his career. He liked it that way. He hoped it would stay that way. But something felt wrong today. "Captain, the Velkai delegation will arrive in 3 hours," said Lieutenant Baek Min-ho, walking up beside him. Min-ho was young, only 25, with bright eyes full of hope. He believed in peace between species. He believed the galaxy was a good place. Do-yeon wished he could believe the same thing. "How many ships?" he asked. "7, sir. The Union says it is a standard diplomatic group." 7 ships for a trade meeting. Do-yeon frowned. That seemed like too many, but he said nothing. The Galactic Union had rules, and humans were still new to this part of space. They had to follow the rules, even when those rules felt wrong. Across the colony, Dr. Kim Yuna was preparing for her day at the medical center. She was a woman of 40 years, with kind eyes and gentle hands. She had come to New Dawn to give her children a better life. Her daughter Ji-woo was 12, and her son Haejin was 8. They were good children, smart and full of laughter. "Mom, do we have to go to school today?" Haejin asked, pulling at her sleeve. Yuna smiled and touched his hair. "Yes, you do. Miss Na is teaching about Earth history today. You will like it." "But it is so far away," Ji-woo said. "Earth, I mean. Will we ever go there?" Yuna paused. She had asked herself the same question many times. Earth was the home of all humans, but she had never seen it. She was born on a space station, raised on a mining colony, and now lived on a farming world at the edge of known space. "Maybe someday," she said. "Now go, both of you. Be good." She watched them run toward the school, their small bodies disappearing into the crowd of other children. There were 847 children in New Dawn. They were the future of the colony. The reason everyone worked so hard? Without them, none of this mattered. At the school, Nasujin was preparing her classroom. She was 32 years old, a teacher who loved her work more than anything. She had no children of her own, but she treated every student like family. Today, she had prepared a special lesson about the first human journey to the stars. "Good morning, everyone," she said as the children took their seats. "Today, we will learn about the brave people who left Earth long ago to find new homes in space." The children listened with wide eyes. They loved stories about adventure and discovery. They did not know that their own story was about to change forever, high above the planet. 7 Velkai ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel. They were long and dark, like insects made of metal. The Velkai were an old species, far older than humans. They had 6 legs, hard shells covering their bodies, and compound eyes that saw everything without feeling. They did not understand love or mercy. They only understood logic and power. Commander Crix stood on the bridge of the largest ship, looking down at the small human colony. To him, humans were nothing. They were weak, emotional, and young. They had only been traveling the stars for 300 years. The Velkai had ruled their part of space for 10,000. "The mineral scans are complete," said one of his officers. "The deposits are deeper than we expected. Extraction will require removal of the surface population." Crix made a sound like clicking stones. It was the Velkai way of showing amusement. "The humans will not matter. But there is something else I want, Commander. They're children. Our scientists say human neural tissue may improve our hive mind processing. Young brains are the most useful." He turned his cold eyes toward the planet. "We will take what we need." On the surface, Captain Do-yeon stood in the colony's small command center watching the Velkai ships approach. His stomach felt tight. His instincts were screaming at him, telling him something was very wrong. Sir, should we raise our shields? Minho asked. No, Doyen said slowly. The Union would see it as an act of aggression. We must follow protocol. But sir, I know, Minho. I know. He closed his eyes for a moment. Just keep the emergency channels open. If anything happens, send a message to Earth immediately. Minho nodded, though his hands were shaking slightly. The Velkai ships entered orbit, their shadows falling over New Dawn like a dark promise. The colonists looked up at the sky, curious but not afraid. They had no reason to be afraid. They were members of the Galactic Union. They were protected. They did not know that. Protection meant nothing to those who did not believe in it. That night, Captain Doyan walked through the quiet streets of the colony. Families were having dinner together. Children were playing games in the parks. Laughter filled the air. He stopped near the school and looked at the building where so many young lives were growing. He thought about his own daughter, lost to pirates 20 years ago. He had sworn to protect the innocent after that. He had sworn to never let another child suffer. Please, he whispered to the stars. Let me be wrong about this. But deep in his heart, he knew he was not wrong. Something terrible was coming, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. 3 days passed since the Velkai arrived. They smiled with their mandibles and spoke words of friendship. They talked about trade and cooperation. They walked through the colony like guests, observing everything with their cold, compound eyes. But Captain Doyan watched them closely. He noticed how they looked at the children. Their eyes followed the young ones like predators, watching prey. It made his blood run cold. You're being paranoid, the Union representative told him through the communications screen. The Velkai are a respected species. They have been members of the Union for 8,000 years. Something is wrong, Doyan insisted. I can feel it. Feelings are not evidence, Captain. Maintain proper diplomatic behavior. The screen went dark. Doyan stood alone in his office, fists clenched at his sides. He wanted to scream. He wanted to put every soldier on high alert. But he had no proof. He had nothing but a feeling in his gut. That night, the colony went to sleep as usual. Parents kissed their children goodnight. Lights went out in the homes. The stars shone peacefully overhead. At exactly 2 a.m, the Velkai struck. They came without warning. Their soldiers dropped from the sky in small pods, moving fast and silent. They went straight to the school dormitory where 214 children were sleeping. The attack was precise, planned, and merciless. Nasujin was working late, preparing lessons for the next day. She heard the first scream and ran outside. What she saw stopped her heart. Velkai soldiers were everywhere. They carried strange weapons that made no sound. Children were being pulled from their beds, drugged with injections, and loaded onto transport vehicles. The little ones did not even have time to cry. No, Sujin screamed. She ran toward the soldiers, trying to stop them. Leave them alone. A Velkai officer turned and struck her with the back of his weapon. She fell to the ground, blood pouring from her head, but she did not lose consciousness. She lay there, unable to move. Watching the horror unfold before her eyes, 9-year-old Han Yunji was pulled from her bed by cold, hard claws. She tried to call for her mother, but something was injected into her neck. Her body went limp. Her eyes stayed open, filled with terror. She was carried away into the darkness. Across the colony, alarms finally began to sound. Captain Doyan grabbed his weapon and ran outside, only to find chaos everywhere. Velkai soldiers were retreating to their landing pods, their mission already complete. Minho. Doyan shouted into his communicator. Send the distress signal. Send it now. I am trying, sir. Minho's voice was shaking. They are jamming our communications. I can only get a fragment through. Doyan fired at the nearest Velkai soldier, but there were too many. A shot hit him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He fell against a wall, pain exploding through his body. Through blurred vision, he watched the last transport pod rise into the sky. Inside were over 200 children, stolen from their beds like animals taken for slaughter. Dr. Kim Yuna ran to the school as soon as she heard the alarms. She pushed through the crowd of crying parents, her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. Goo. Heijin! She screamed, but her children were not there. Their beds were empty. Their shoes were still by the door. They were gone. Yuna fell to her knees. The world around her became silent. She could see people moving, mouths opening and closing, but she could hear nothing. Only a high-pitched ringing in her ears and the sound of her own heartbeat. Her children were gone. In the sky above, the Velkai mothership received the transport pods and immediately jumped to faster-than-light travel. Commander Crix watched the data from the mission with satisfaction. 214 specimens collected, his officer reported. All in acceptable condition. Good. Begin the extraction procedures on the weakest ones first. We will see if their neural tissue is as useful as our scientists predicted. The procedures began within hours. The children who were too young or too sick did not survive. Their small bodies were disposed of like garbage. The others were kept alive, but only barely. Their minds connected to machines that pulled and prodded at their thoughts. Back on New Dawn, morning came like a curse. The colony was destroyed in spirit, if not in body. Parents wandered the streets, calling names that would never be answered. The school stood empty, its windows dark, its halls silent. Captain Doyen, his wound bandaged but still bleeding, gathered the survivors in the town square. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with something deeper than pain. Did the message get through? He asked Minho. A fragment, sir. Maybe 30%. I do not know if Earth received enough to understand. They will understand, Doyon said quietly. They will understand. A Velkai ship appeared in the sky, broadcasting a message to the colony below. Commander Crix's voice filled the air, cold and without emotion. Your offspring now serve a higher purpose. Do not attempt to interfere. You are insignificant beings in a vast galaxy. Accept your loss and continue your small lives. This is the way of the universe. The transmission ended. Dr. Yuna stood in the crowd, her face empty of tears. She had cried until there was nothing left. Now there was only a cold, dark place inside her where her heart used to be. They took my children, she whispered. They took my babies. An old woman beside her touched her arm. There is nothing we can do. We are too small, too weak. Yuna looked up at the sky, at the stars that had once seemed so beautiful. She said softly, They do not understand. They do not know what they have done. What do you mean? Yuna's eyes hardened like steel. They think humans are weak because we are young. They think our emotions make us lesser beings. But they do not know the truth. What truth? There is nothing in this universe more dangerous than a human protecting their child. And they just woke up 12,000 of us. The old woman looked at her with confusion. But somewhere out in the stars, a fragment of a distress signal was racing toward Earth. And when it arrived, the galaxy would learn that some lines should never be crossed. 2 weeks after the attack, the fragment of the distress signal finally reached Earth. It traveled through relay stations and communication networks until it arrived at the United Human Command headquarters in Seoul. The building was a massive tower that touched the clouds, home to the most powerful military leaders humanity had ever produced. Admiral Shin Tae-yuk sat alone in a dark room. Watching the decoded message on a screen, he was 63 years old, with a face carved from stone and eyes that had seen too much pain. 30 years ago, he had lost his own daughter to space pirates. He had searched for her body for 5 years before giving up. That loss had changed him forever. Now, he watched recordings from New Dawn. He saw parents screaming for their children. He saw the empty beds in the school dormitory. He heard the cold words of Commander Crix, dismissing human suffering like it meant nothing. When the recording ended, Tae-yuk sat in silence for a long time. His hands did not shake. His face did not change. But something deep inside him, something that had been sleeping for 30 years, woke up. He pressed a button on his desk. Call the War Council. Now. Within 1 hour, the most powerful humans in the galaxy gathered in a single room. Director Choi Hanna, head of Human Intelligence Operations, sat with perfect stillness. She was a woman of 50 years, with short gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had built a network of spies across the galaxy, watching and waiting for the day humanity would need to act. General Yoon Ginho stood by the window, his massive arms crossed over his chest. He commanded the human expeditionary marines, 2 million soldiers trained for war on any world. His nickname was the Hammer, and he had earned it through decades of crushing humanity's enemies. "You have all seen the recordings, Admiral?" Taiyuk said. 214 children were taken. Our sources tell us that at least 160 have already been killed in their experiments. The room was silent. No one moved. "The Galactic Union refuses to help," Taiyuk continued. "They call this a minor territorial dispute. They say the Velkai are too important to punish." Director Hannah spoke, her voice flat and cold. "The Union is afraid of the Velkai. They have been afraid for centuries. They will not help us." "Then we do not need their help," General Jinho said. His voice was like thunder. "Give me the order, Admiral. Let me show these insects what happens when you touch our children." Taiyuk stood and walked to the center of the room. "What I am about to propose has never been done in human history. It goes against everything the Union believes in. It may make us enemies of every species in the galaxy." "What is it?" Hannah asked. "Total Species Retribution Protocol." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Everyone knew what it meant. The protocol had been created 200 years ago, hidden in the darkest corners of human military planning. It was a promise that humanity made to itself. If any species deliberately harmed human children, there would be no negotiation, no peace, no mercy. The offending species would be completely destroyed. Hannah asked quietly. Taiyuk looked at her with eyes that had turned to ice. "They took our children. They cut open their brains for experiments. They threw their bodies away like garbage." He paused. "Yes, I am certain." General Jinho smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator finally released from its cage. "How many ships do we have?" 4,000 warships, Hannah said, hidden in reserve stations across human space. "We have been building them for a century, waiting for a day like this." "The Velkai have twice that number," Jinho pointed out. "Numbers do not matter," Taiyuk said. "We have something they do not have." "What is that?" "Rage." Within days, the human fleet began to move. Ships that had been sleeping in hidden bases woke up, their engines burning with power. Soldiers said goodbye to their families, knowing they might never return. Weapons were loaded, plans were made, and humanity prepared for a war unlike any it had ever fought. The Galactic Union received word of the mobilization and sent urgent messages to Earth. They warned humanity not to act. They threatened sanctions and isolation. They called humans emotional, irrational, and dangerous. Admiral Taiyuk read each message and deleted it without response. Director. Hannah's intelligence teams worked around the clock, mapping every Velkai colony, outpost, and station. They found the locations of breeding worlds, military bases, and the homeworld itself. Nothing was hidden from human eyes. "We have identified 47 Velkai worlds," Hannah reported. 14 billion total population? All of them? General Ginho asked. "Every single one." On the day the fleet departed, Admiral Taiyuk stood before a camera and addressed his soldiers. His words were broadcast to every ship, every station, every human in the galaxy. "Today, we go to war. Not for territory, not for resources, not for power. We go to war because the Velkai believed they could take our children without consequence. They believed humanity was weak. They believed our love for our young was a flaw." He paused, his eyes burning with cold fire. "They were wrong. Our love is not a weakness. It is our greatest strength. It is the fire that will burn their worlds to ash. It is the storm that will wipe their species from the stars." He raised his fist to his chest over his heart. "They asked us why we kept building warships during peacetime. They laughed at our paranoia. They called us foolish for preparing for wars that would never come." His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow echoed through every speaker in the fleet. "Now they will understand. We were not preparing for war. We were preparing for the day someone made us angry. And now, the Velkai will learn what that anger means. The fleet jumped to faster than light travel, 4,000 ships moving as one. Behind them, Earth grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared into the darkness. The galaxy had thought humans were the quiet ones, the peaceful ones. The weak ones, they were about to learn how wrong they were. The Velkai received reports of the human fleet mobilization and dismissed them immediately. Their hive mind calculated the odds of success for such a small species against their mighty empire. The numbers were laughable. Humans had 4,000 ships. The Velkai had 9,000. The outcome was obvious. Commander Crix received the news while overseeing experiments on the remaining human children. He made the clicking sound that was Velkai laughter. Let them come. They will break against our defenses like water against stone. But Crix did not understand humans. None of the Velkai did. The first battle happened at Nexus 4, small Velkai outpost on the edge of their territory. 300 Velkai soldiers were stationed there, along with a dozen defensive ships. They detected the human fleet approaching and prepared for a standard engagement. They never had a chance. Human ships dropped out of faster than light, travel inside the Velkai defensive perimeter, a maneuver that every species in the galaxy considered impossible. The calculations required were too complex. The risks were too high. No sane species would attempt it. Humans were not feeling particularly sane, Admiral. Tayuk watched from his command ship as human weapons tore through the Velkai defenses. The battle lasted 18 minutes. When it was over, nothing remained of Nexus 4 but floating debris and silence. No survivors detected, Lieutenant Minho reported. He had joined the fleet at his own request, wanting to see justice done for New Dawn. Good, Tayuk said. Move to the next target. Captain Do-Yan was on one of the assault ships, leading ground recovery teams. His shoulder still ached from the wound he received during the attack, but he refused to stay behind. He had failed to protect the children of New Dawn. He would not fail them again. Captain, we have found something, one of his soldiers reported. Do-Yan walked to where the soldier was pointing. In the wreckage of a Velkai laboratory, they found evidence of the experiments. Small beds with restraints, medical tools stained with human blood, data files containing images too horrible to describe. Do-Yan stood very still for a long moment. Then he turned to his team. Document everything. The galaxy will know what these monsters did. Dr. Kim Yuna worked on the medical ship, preparing for the possibility of finding survivors. She had not smiled since the attack. She barely spoke, but her hands were steady, and her mind was focused. Every child they found, alive or dead, deserved to be identified. Every family deserved to know what happened to their little ones. Doctor, a nurse said gently, you should rest. I will rest when this is over, Yuna replied. Not before. The human fleet moved through Velkai space like a storm of fire. They did not stop to negotiate. They did not accept surrenders. Every outpost, every station, every colony that they found was completely destroyed. The second major battle occurred at Keith Prim, a Velkai breeding world. 5 million Velkai lived there, including millions of eggs waiting to hatch. The Velkai expected humans to hesitate at attacking such a place. Breeding worlds were sacred in their culture. Admiral Tayuk did not hesitate. Human weapons descended from orbit. Kinetic projectiles the size of buildings slammed into the planet's surface, cracking continents and boiling oceans. Bioweapons specifically designed to target Velkai genetics were released into the atmosphere. Within 3 hours, nothing on Keth Prime was alive. The Galactic Union watched in horror. They sent more messages to humanity, demanding an end to the violence. They threatened to declare humans a danger to galactic peace. Admiral, Tuk finally responded with a single transmission. Stay out of our way. No other species dared to help the Velkai. Some had considered the insectoid species their allies. Others had traded with them for centuries. But when they saw what humanity was willing to do, they all stepped back and watched from a safe distance. On the Velkai homeworld, Commander Crix finally began to feel something his species rarely experienced. It was a cold sensation in his thorax, a tightness in his limbs. He did not recognize it at first, because the Velkai hive mind had engineered fear out of their genetics thousands of years ago. But this was fear. Pure, primal, overwhelming fear. How many worlds have we lost? He demanded. 12, Commander. All completely destroyed. No survivors. 12 worlds in 30 days. Crix's mandibles clicked nervously. This is impossible. Humans are supposed to be weak, Commander. Our calculations were wrong. We did not account for their emotional response. Their anger appears to override their survival instincts. Crix thought about the children in his laboratories. Most of them were dead now, their brains emptied for experiments that had produced no useful results. Only 31 remained alive, kept as potential bargaining tools. Contact the Galactic Union, Crix ordered. Tell them we need help. Tell them humans are committing genocide. The message was sent, but the Union did not respond. They were too afraid of what humanity might do to anyone who helped the Velkai. Lieutenant. Minho intercepted the Velkai communications and brought them to Admiral Tayuk. Sir, they are begging for help. Their tone has completely changed. They sound desperate. Tayuk read the messages without expression. Good, sir. They are talking about surrendering the remaining children. Paying reparations. Anything we want. It is too late for that. But sir, if we can save the children, we will save them, Tayuk said quietly. And then we will finish what we started. The Velkai made a choice when they took those children. Now, they will live with the consequences. He paused. Or rather, they will not live at all. Minho wanted to argue. He still believed in peace and mercy. But when he thought about the recordings from New Dawn, the empty beds, the screaming parents, the cold words of Commander Crix, his arguments died in his throat. Some crimes could not be forgiven. The fleet regrouped and set course for the final target, Velkareth Prime, the Velkai homeworld. 14 billion lives waited there. Unaware that their extinction had already been decided, Dr. Yuna watched the stars from her window, thinking of her children. Juwu might still be alive somewhere. Heijin might still be waiting for his mother to save him. She clenched her fists until her nails drew blood from her palms. Hold on, she whispered to the darkness. We are coming. The human fleet arrived at Velkareth Prime on a day that would be remembered forever. 340 warships formed a ring around the planet, blocking every escape route. The Velkai homeworld hung in space like a blue and brown jewel, beautiful and ancient. 14 billion beings lived on its surface, going about their daily lives. Unaware that their world had only hours left to exist, Commander Crix stood in his command center, watching the human ships on his screens. His legs trembled. His compound eyes could not look away from the wall of death surrounding his planet. Open a communication channel, he ordered. I wish to speak with their leader. A connection was established. Admiral Tayuk's face appeared on the screen. His expression was as cold as the void of space. Admiral Crix began, trying to keep his voice steady. I wish to negotiate. We have 31 of your children still alive. We will return them immediately. We will pay any price you demand. Territory, resources, technology. Name your terms. Tayuk said nothing for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft and terrifying. You should have thought about consequences before you touched them, Commander. Please. We can reach an agreement. War benefits no one. This is not war, Tayuk replied. War has rules. War has mercy. This is extinction. Crix felt his thorax tighten with cold terror. You cannot do this. The Galactic Union will not allow it. You will become enemies of every species in the galaxy. But your species will not be there to see it. Tayuk leaned forward slightly. Return the children. Now, that is not a negotiation. It is an order. Crix had no choice. He commanded his soldiers to gather the 31 surviving children and transport them to the human fleet. It was his only hope of gaining mercy. Captain Doyen led the recovery team that met the Velkai transport ship. He stood at the airlock with his weapon ready, not trusting the insects for a single moment. When the doors opened, he saw them. 31 children, thin and pale, their eyes empty from trauma. They walked slowly like broken dolls. Doyon dropped his weapon and fell to his knees. Tears streamed down his face as he opened his arms to the first child. It was a boy of about 7 years, barely able to stand. "You are safe now," Doyon whispered. "You are safe. I promise." The children were brought to the medical ship, where Dr. Yuna and her team waited. She scanned every face, searching desperately for her own children. When she saw Jiwoo, her heart nearly stopped. "Jiwoo." She ran forward and wrapped her daughter in her arms. The girl was thin, covered in scars, but alive. "Alive, Mom," Guhu whispered. Her voice was broken, barely a sound. "Mom, I knew you would come." Yuna held her tighter than she had ever held anyone. "Where is Heijin? Where is your brother?" Jiwoo's eyes filled with tears. She slowly shook her head. Yuna understood. Her son was gone. He had not survived the experiments. A part of her soul died in that moment, but she did not let go of Jiwoo. She held on like her life depended on it, because in a way, it did. With the children secured, Admiral Taiyuk gave the final order: deploy Project Silence. Massive ships moved into position around Velkarith Prime. They were not weapons in the traditional sense. They were machines designed to manipulate gravity itself, to crush a planet from the inside out. Humanity had built them in secret, hoping they would never be used. The machines activated. Deep beneath the surface of Velkarith Prime, the planet's core began to collapse. Commander Crix watched from his command center as the ground started to shake. Buildings collapsed. Oceans began to drain into cracks that opened across the continents. The sky turned red with fire and ash. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." He opened a broadcast to the entire galaxy, his voice filled with disbelief and terror. "We were a proud species. We ruled these stars for 10,000 years, and these humans destroyed us over offspring. What kind of monsters have we awakened?" The planet cracked open like an egg. Fire erupted from every surface. Mountains fell. Cities vanished. 14 billion Velkai screamed as their world died around them, and then there was silence. Velkarith Prime collapsed into itself, leaving nothing but floating rocks and dust. The Velkai species, which had existed for millions of years, ceased to exist in a single moment. Admiral Taiyuk watched until it was over. Then he turned to his communications officer. "Send a message to every species in the Galactic Union. Send it to every world, every station, every ship. Make sure everyone hears it." He stepped in front of the camera and spoke words that would echo through history. "I am Admiral Shin Taiyuk of the United Human Fleet. What you have witnessed today was not war. It was justice. The Velkai believed they could take our children without consequence. They believed humanity was weak because we are young. They believed our love was a flaw." His voice hardened into steel. "Let this serve as a lesson to every species in the galaxy. Humanity does not forgive harm to our children. We do not negotiate. We do not forget. The next species that touches a human child will share the fate of the Velkai. This is not a warning. This is a promise." The message ended. Across the galaxy, alien governments watched the recording in horrified silence. They had thought humans were peaceful, reasonable, harmless. They had been very wrong in the weeks that followed. Laws were changed on every world. Human children became the most protected beings in the known universe. Not out of love. Not out of respect. Out of pure, absolute terror. On the journey home, Dr. Kim Yuna sat beside her daughter's bed, holding Jiwoo's hand while the girl slept. She thought of Hajin, her beautiful little boy who would never grow up. She cried until there were no tears left. But she also felt something else. Something strange and terrible. She felt at peace. Her son would never come back. Nothing would ever fill that hole in her heart. But the creatures who hurt him were gone. Every single one of them was gone. In a universe that often seemed cruel and unfair, that was something. Captain Doyen stood on the observation deck of his ship, watching the stars pass by. He had spent his whole life trying to protect the innocent. He had failed at New Dawn, but in the end, justice had been done. A young soldier approached him. "Sir, was this right? Destroying an entire species?" Doyan was silent for a long time. Then he said, "I do not know if it was right. I only know it was necessary. Some lines should never be crossed. The Velkai crossed that line. And now the galaxy knows what happens when someone threatens our children." The soldier nodded slowly and walked away. Doyan looked back at the stars. Somewhere out there, alien parents were holding their own children close, grateful that they had never done anything to anger the humans. That was enough. That had to be enough. Back on Earth, life slowly returned to normal. The children who survived received the best care humanity could provide. Many would carry scars forever, but they were surrounded by love, protected by a civilization that had proven it would do anything to keep them safe. The story of the Velkai became a legend, warning passed down through generations. And whenever a young species asked why humans seemed so peaceful, their elders would tell them the truth. Humanity was kind, patient, forgiving, but there were lines that should never be crossed. And now, thanks to the Velkai, no one in the galaxy would ever dare to cross them again.